Continuing conversation about the presidential race, of course, but we got to check in on this flaming local issue.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Welcome in. Shanna Pearson Merkowitz, a political science professor at URI, joins us again for a conversation. She's a hit on this show, so we've asked her to come back, and I enjoy her perspective. Obviously, we have a fluid presidential race, and polling data is changing, and we'll talk about that. And I want to get her take on the two conventions and all of that. I promised you that on Wednesday, meaning tomorrow night, that we would spend some more time on this particular matter. So welcome in. Nice to have you. I just wanted to make a brief mention on the 38 Studios post-game developments from Friday afternoon's story dump, which was an embarrassment to the Attorney General of this state. And I'm sad to say that the state police went along with it, and I'm still trying to figure out why. We've invited Colonel O'Donnell on the program, a guy who I have profound respect for. I must tell you, I have no respect for the Attorney General. Haven't since he never recused himself from 38 Studios as a voter for the enabling legislation that caused the funding, that caused Kurt Schilling to be funded, which caused, well, there were other causes. But here's the headline yesterday that was the big development. The Speaker of the House, Nick Mattiello, releases demands that 38 Studios investigation documents be released. Here was his statement. I called upon the state police and the AG to release any and all information pertaining to 38 Studios. The taxpayers have a right to the complete story. Now listen, I have to laugh at this. Nick Mattiello is correct. There's some discussion here about whether it's logistically okay to release grand jury documents with a quote open case. We'll get to that in a second. But I have to laugh out loud. While the Speaker of the House, I think, has made an appropriate request, it's a politically incisive request. He looks like a guy that's trying to clean up the 38 Studios mess. As Speaker of the House, he played passive-aggressive with the House Oversight Committee. He allowed it to operate with State Representative Karen McBeth, who did her best to fumble through it, having only one real interesting piece of testimony from Steve Constantino, the former House Finance Chairperson, coming down from Vermont to wax poetic about how he knew nothing nefarious about all of this and did the best he could for the taxpayers. That House Oversight Committee exercise was a complete sham. And the Speaker of the House tried to get away with the notion that, under his tutelage, we were trying to get some oversight. It was a complete phony exercise. So when he suggests that the records now from the state police investigation ought to be open and the grand jury process, he feeds what the public demands, yet he's an interesting character to be asking for it. I give him points on style, especially because he's got a race in his own Cranston district. I give him very little points on sincerity. In the meantime, the Attorney General responds to this with this release from Amy Kemp, the spokesperson. Release of documents could jeopardize the integrity of the investigation should new information come to light that would warrant it to be reactivated. This request appears to be a political reaction, not a legal reaction. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience and the jury, that is what they call the pot calling the kettle black. The Attorney General has been purely political in this. He is a hack from the University of Hackarama. He didn't understand that he should recuse himself from this investigation. He refused to recuse himself from this investigation. Now, I'm not telling you that he did anything dirty when it came to the whole play of 38 Studios, but that he is so politically and ethically brain dead that he didn't recuse himself from this whole thing, and then he, through his spokesperson, has the unmitigated gall to suggest that the House Speaker is acting politically is a laugh a minute. And the notion that the investigation could be turned up again and while it's inactive is open is a flaming joke. The dump of news on Friday afternoon is an insult to the people of Rhode Island, and I'm just getting started on this conversation. We talked about it at length on the radio yesterday, weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRO. We'll focus on the conversation tomorrow here with some people who have some points of view. But while it's been a nagging problem, a really nagging problem for the state. I will tell you that not doing the right, let me just say this. What the investigation, the way it went, did was to get in front of the legislature's chance to do the right thing. When the state police, through the colonel, who I have profound respect for, declared that it would be a problem for the legislature to have its own hearings while they were conducting theirs, was sticking their chest out and bullying this investigation, which ended up coming up with absolutely nothing. And then for them to do that news dump, more absolutely nothing. All right, we'll get to it tomorrow. As you can tell, this one really bothers me, because I know it really bothers you. Headline, presidential race, Hillary gets the spread. CNN also talks about a bigger lead, matter of fact. The CNN ORC poll actually has a larger spread. Here's the latest in the campaign.
Donald Trump did not hold back while criticizing Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders' decision to endorse Hillary Clinton.
He made a deal with the devil. She's the devil. He made a deal with the devil.
As the GOP presidential candidate campaigned in front of thousands of supporters in Pennsylvania last night, the bipartisan backlash continues to mount over his comments about the parents of a fallen Muslim American soldier. In an interview on Fox News, Trump was asked about the controversy.
You did call this man's son a hero, did you not?
Yes, I did, absolutely. Whenever you have the Gold Star families, I mean, these are great people, great families, frankly.
Another billionaire businessman was on the campaign trail on Monday, Warren Buffett. Buffett endorsed Hillary Clinton during a rally in his hometown of Omaha, Nebraska.
This is the greatest nation on earth, and our best days are still ahead of us.
A new CBS poll shows Hillary Clinton with a 7-point lead over Trump after the Democratic convention last week.
So, welcome back, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
What do you think of the point spread?
Well, it's interesting. If you, individual polls aside, if you look at the polling nationally, the average of all of the polls that are coming out, she's about 4.5% up. So, some polls say she's 9% up, some polls say she's 7%. If you take them all together, it's 4.5% up. Those are kind of a return to pre-Republican National Convention numbers. So this could be a stabilization. She certainly got a huge bump coming out of the convention. But we're going to have to see the next few days if it stabilizes to exactly where it was prior to the Republican National Convention.
Yeah. Do any of these numbers mean anything until after Labor Day?
Yes. So, what's interesting from a political science perspective is that we can usually call the races 6 months prior. Because these things don't tend to change very much as long as there's not some major slip up or, an attack on the United States or, new really bad evidence on one of them that they've been breaking the law for the last couple years, right? Assuming that we have a consistency in our election, that this is what it looks like for the next few months, up until November, I would expect basically no change, that everything's settling back into where it was prior to the conventions.
Let's take a look at the CNN polling data on the two-way head-to-head matchup, if we can, Laura. That's two-way and four-way are actually up there. Clinton and Trump 9 points, and then Gary Johnson comes in and narrows the gap. By the way, Johnson's at 10% at the CBS poll and narrows the gap between Clinton and Trump to 5 points rather than the 8 points that are there. I find this to be really interesting. Here's the headline from Bernie Sanders and his request today: please don't do this. Please don't do this. And so it's funny, I've been talking to my radio listeners daily about this, and as I whip up on Trump, they ask me, "What are you gonna do, vote for Hillary?" And I say, "No, I think Gary Johnson is my guy." Yet it seems that his data enhances Trump's position.
I doubt that Johnson's votes are really enhancing Trump's position. Certainly,
well,
Stein's
the data,
votes
every time you get a head-to-head matchup with Clinton and Trump, throw him in. her lead shrinks.
I think that's not really true. I think there's a fair amount of people who just really don't want Trump at this point. And so when you say one of the two, I think you may be in this position where you're only given two choices. What do? I guess I go for Hillary, right? I'm not in the polling booth. You're telling me I have to choose from two choices that I don't actually have to choose from, right? And so I say, I vote for Hillary even though I'm a Republican, right? Even though I've never voted for a Democrat in my life. Then you expand it and you say, well, here are all four of your choices. And people say, well, actually, what I'd pick is Johnson, right? And so, yes, in a two-way race, I mean, this is what I said before, it's just like not voting. Voting for any third candidate is an eventual vote for the winner. Because you're basically exiting. You're taking a vote and wasting it. And that is a it's an action in favor of whoever the winner is. Because you didn't vote for the other person. Right? And so what's happening right now is Johnson going to be a spoiler, like people could accuse Nader of being? Is Johnson going to be a Perot that eventually led to Bill Clinton's election? I mean, this could be something very similar. Right now, when I look at those numbers, I see Bill Clinton's first race all over again. He didn't win with a majority, he won with a plurality, because Perot took a whole lot of votes. Did he take them from both sides?
You think Johnson surges? The only way Johnson surges is that he's got to crawl to 15%, outside the litigation that he and Stein from the Green Party are pursuing here to get on the stages. He needs 15% for that, debate committee to say, okay, you're in. If he doesn't get there, he doesn't play the role Perot does.
Right.
Right?
Well, who watches the debates? Do you need to be in the debates, or do you just need to be on that ballot for a Republican protest vote to check somebody else? Right? Same thing with the Democrats. To vote for Stein because you're upset it wasn't Bernie Sanders, you may just need to be on the ballot, right? I don't know how, at this point, I don't think the debates change too many people's minds. I don't think that many people really watch them who are not already decided.
All right, I'm getting you. I'm a little confused. I'm going to process during the break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about this. Don't go anywhere. Hillary Clinton at the convention. I want to get the professor's thoughts on the convention itself coming up in a little bit. But if I understand you correctly, when you're talking about these numbers, and can we put that graphic up one more time, Laura, on the four-way matchup, two-way matchup? All right, let's go with Seoul. So you say with a 9-point spread on a two-way basis, but it shrinks only a little, 45-37, with Johnson and Stein in there. And again, the CBS polling data has it closer with Johnson and Stein in there, between Clinton and Trump. It's only a 5-point gap. You don't think that really worries Hillary Clinton?
Oh, I'm sure it does. And she has good reason to worry. I mean, right now the prediction is she's got about a 70% chance of winning. But that means she has a 30% chance of losing. And while, you may or may not be a betting person, 30% chance is still scary, right? And if it rains on election day in some key states, North Carolina, Colorado, Florida, the Democrats could have a serious problem on their hands. Because for the Democrats, the key is turnout. It's not about those numbers. Those numbers aren't going to shift that much. And so it's about making sure that the voters actually get to the polls. And things like bad weather
they're
can
incredibly
stop them.
more organized than Donald Trump will be.
Indeed. And you look at their campaigns right now, the Democratic Party knows what they're doing. But the Democratic Party base, who they need to turn out at the polls, also has a lot of challenges getting there. And so anything that happens on election day to keep people at home can be seriously dangerous for Hillary Clinton. So even if she had a 90% chance of winning, she'd be worried because there's a lot of factors in getting her voters to the polls. And that's what's key. This isn't at this point, the campaign is not trying to persuade anybody. The campaign is making sure that you care enough that you go to the polls. And that's going to be their mission for the next year until election day. From today until election day, that's going to be their mission.
You think the Trump voting bloc is committed? They're coming.
I think the approximately 7% of Americans who voted for Trump, I think they are very committed. Do I think the 35% who say they are Trump supporters at this point, are they very committed? I think a subset of them are.
Picture there of Governor Pence. I keep looking at Governor Pence thinking, really?
Why?
Why? Right?
It's confusing. It's really confusing because that is a man who has deep devotion to his causes. he has gone up against his party numerous times, and really I think he has deeply held beliefs that he fights for. They may not be beliefs that everybody agrees with, but he has deeply held beliefs, and so jumping on this train seems totally bizarre to me. It seems very shocking.
Other data that Lexi put together here, the 538 polls are interesting. They've got a question about whether this bounce is actually the new place where this race is, and it's kind of on your theory that that which was before both conventions is now. There are some hints in Clinton's post-convention lead over Trump will eventually settle in at about 7 points, give or take a couple. The biggest tip-off is that both the national and state polls look similar to the ones we were seeing in June when she maintained a lead over Trump. So they're more or less suggesting that the bounce is more than Trump got. The equilibrium there is more or less June's equilibrium, which goes to your suggestion that you could call these things 6 months out. Forecast models aren't used to seeing a lot of 7-point overnight shifts, which rarely occur outside the conventions. Again, to your point, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. These things tend to be very, very stable. I would actually recommend viewers go to that website and you can look at the polls over the last year. You can go back and look at Obama's polls, for the year of his election, and they're remarkably stable. They get spikes during things like conventions or, big dramatic events, but they fall right back to where they were. It's really, I mean, that's the kind of amazing thing. I think I would like to draw our attention to, it's also, again, not the popular vote that matters. It's the Electoral College.
Right.
And, that's kind of the key. And Trump's got a real challenge ahead of him getting enough votes to actually win any electoral college.
Well, he's got to win Ohio. He was reportedly dead even during his own convention in Ohio. He's got to win Pennsylvania. And he's got to win Florida. And Florida's a real uphill battle for him.
Particularly,
right?
I think, in this election. I mean, between Latinos, but also military families, he's not doing well with military families right now. I'm very interested in what happens with the military family vote in this election, because they have historically been, they lean Republican. The military is a winning issue for Republicans. This whole Mr. and Mrs. Khan thing, you think is really going to damage him? Well, I think that may explain why we see this 7-point jump, 7 to 9 point jump. What Nate Silver said, we're not used to seeing this big of a jump in post-convention, but we're also not used to having a candidate who attacks military families because they said something or anyone who spoke at the convention. Usually they kind of ignore them and let everything roll away.
Instead, he can't help himself.
He obviously can't, because it's obviously a losing move. He does not need to secure his base, right? These were tactics that seemed like moves to secure the Republican base, the very small primary base during the primary. And then you move, right? Everybody knows the presidential's candidates move to trying to secure the general election base, which is much more moderate, it's much more diverse. But he keeps going to secure that very small base. And that can really, tune out a lot of voters, which means maybe those military voters may not say, we're going to vote for Hillary, but they may stay at home, or they may vote for Johnson, right? It really depends. But if he keeps up that record, Florida, that's going to be a key thing.
Well, it's also going to have a lot of impact on the Senate and House races, and we'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. Leslie Stahl, with Governor Pence and Donald Trump in that 60 Minutes thing. But here's the question: if Donald Trump begins to list, in this whole next month or so, what begins to happen to the Republican establishment that has just been biting its tongue, crossing its fingers and toes, and worrying about winning the Senate, which is in real jeopardy, and the House, which statistically is not, but could be?
I think that's the big challenge. I mean, you see McCain coming out
on this military issue.
Right, on this military issue, calling out Trump for it, and that's, that can be a very dangerous.
Same with the Speaker of the House.
Yep, and it can be a very dangerous position for particularly McCain, who has to win a Senate race. Senate races are very different than House races, right? The House is so gerrymandered that not too many of those seats are actually up for grabs. The Senate, in any election, any of those seats could move. And so, you've got Florida, you've got Arizona, you've got some key states where senators are walking Republican senators are walking this fine line saying, like, how do I distance, still make sure my voters go to the polls, skip the presidency potentially and vote for me, right? How do I not turn anybody off because I don't want to lose that extreme base who's, you know, die hard for Trump, and Arizona's got a fair number of them. You know, I think they're in a very difficult position in that, and I think that may be what, you know, the Democratic Party is really counting on, that, you know, hopefully Trump will self-implode and that will cause a shift in the Senate.
Well, what is the definition of self-implode? Because he's done enough to implode all the way through. Is it going to be just the wear and tear of who he is and how he's behaved and what lack of specifics he's forgotten to offer and all that, just kind of settling into a never was a serious candidate to win the election anyway type of campaign?
I think it's more of, you know, we're starting to see more of the electorate pay attention. And so what is behind us is behind us. You know, Trump's made lots of statements that could potentially sway people, but nobody was paying attention except for the primary electorate, what we call the primary electorate, the people who vote in the primary, and even a small subset of them. Who he's moving into is the people who've just now started saying, like, who are these people? Right? And it's these statements where he attacks, you know, service members. I mean, he attacked McCain, saying, you know, I prefer people who don't get captured, right? And now he's attacking.
That's an old one, but
yeah,
it
right.
lingers.
But now it's like a buildup, right? And so now he's saying these things when the general election, when the general electorate is paying attention.
Answering questions on Ukraine as if he didn't know what the heck was going on. You know, as if Crimea and Ukraine are not one and the same for him. I mean, he couldn't do it. The president today, I don't have the video because it happened just prior to our production this afternoon, but the president once again doubled down on the idea that he was absolutely unfit to be the president of the United States. Not sure, every time Barack Obama gets after him, it seems to help him.
Yeah, there's a big, you know, among Republicans, there's a big just anti-Obama sentiment. I don't think Obama getting involved, talking at all, helps his cause much in terms of attracting Republicans. I think that message is actually much better delivered by other people, people who are not wrapped up in the anti-Obama movement.
It feels like an Obama legacy defense mechanism, though. Yeah. He's petrified this guy is going to unwind everything he did.
But the comments about the Ukraine, I mean, they make, you know, comments that I think a lot of commentators attack Sarah Palin for look relatively, you know, harmless at this point, right? I mean, he's showing she was more prepared than he was.
The big question is, we're going to be talking about this on the radio today and tomorrow. Do you really think Donald Trump thinks he's going to win this thing, or is he just setting up for another business model?
I think definitely from the beginning he was setting up for a business model. I think he may be enough. He may have enough of an ego that now he thinks he's going to win, but I don't think for when he got into it he ever thought he was going to win.
You think this thing is over?
I
Barring
would never,
some catastrophe?
No, I would never count on that, because what I think campaigns come down to is turnout. And so that means election day is the key. And we can't count it over until election day.
But if she wins by 8 points across the board, you'd say, told you.
Of course.
Thanks for the visit. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Really smart stuff. Final word and we come back. Stay with us. So the latest opportunism in this race, Frank Galasso, who's a local artist, is hooked up with Yacht Club soda. The blue and the red, you get it? One's a lime and the other's a what? I don't know. But hey, listen, might as well have some fun with this race because it's been painful. Hillary did show up with Bill today to Mark Weiner's funeral. We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. God bless him. We'll see you on the radio at 3 o'clock tomorrow on WPRO and back here tomorrow night. Thanks for watching. Good night.